Let's get back to those executive orders now and executive actions, too, signed by the president before that crowd.
One of the most important to our viewers had to do with the federal workforce. Let's listen.
Sir, the next item, as you announced in your speech, is a requirement that federal workers return to full-time in-person work immediately.
Affects a lot of people in our region. The News 4 I-Team's Tracy Wilkins joins us now in the studio to break down what's actually in that executive order and what it means to a lot of people here, Tracy.
Yeah, a lot of folks paying attention to this. We have more than 3 million federal workers nationwide. 15% of them work here in the D.C. region. It is our largest employer here in our region. So plenty of folks paying attention to this and waiting to see what President Trump would say about the return to the office for federal workers. Let's take a look at the executive order and what it is that it's saying exactly. Heads of all departments and agencies in the executive branch of government shall, as soon as practicable, take all necessary steps to terminate remote work agreements and require employees to return to work in person at their respective duty stations on a full-time basis, provided that the department and agency heads shall make exemptions they deem necessary. So there are a couple of important things that we need to break down here. First of all, remote workers, these are some folks who have never been in an office who are now being told that they need to return to the office if their supervisors say that that's what is necessary.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about the latest meltdown from federal employees over the fact that Trump is making them come back to work, okay? There are a significant amount of federal employees who are working remotely, a lot of whom have kind of moved away from Washington, D.C., okay? They went to live out in some other place in the country, probably much cheaper. And now, all of a sudden, Trump is saying, no, you got to come back into the office, right? You got to move back, okay? You got to come back or else you lose your job. So a lot of people face a lot of hard choices, and they're not having a great time with the reality that they have to make a hard choice about essentially moving back to D.C. for their federal job or to move back to wherever the government is telling them to move back to. And I want to talk about that, okay, because there are opinions across the board about this mandate for federal workers to come back to work.
We do need to go back to work, in my opinion, because everything's over now.
I don't necessarily think it's I think it's a political stunt.
Imagine how much money it's taking to actually run those buildings. No one's working there.
One of the supporters of this return to work effort is none other than D.C.'s Democratic Mayor Muriel Bowser, was cited several times over the last few years that the lack of federal workers in the nation's capital has hurt the local economy. And while some labor attorneys tell Fox 5 they expect lawsuits to try to stop the White House effort, Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen says he does have concerns about this one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. A lot of federal employees are not happy about this. In fact, a lot of the spouses of federal employees are not happy about this. And that is the situation that this leftist woman is in, as she's going to rant on social media, on TikTok, about being forced to come back to work, right? And how that is so oppressive to people like her. So without further ado, let's get into it.
So my husband's a federal teleworker, which is different than a remote worker. He's been working from home since 2014. His program was signed off on by Congress. There's a union that has the telework as part of their collective bargaining rights. And we got an email in the night that we have to move. We have to move our whole lives from New Mexico to we don't know where yet. We don't know if it's going to be D.C. We don't know if it's going to be a remote office in Denver or somewhere. And I just feel really sick about it. This is deeply inhumane. We have kids in schools.
Wow. It is deeply inhumane to require a federal worker to relocate back to an office. This is the world that we're living in, guys, where the average American, I mean, let's be real. Let's have 100% an honest conversation about this. Okay. I'm not one of these people that's just like, oh, screw remote work, super traditionalist type person, right? I personally like to side with tradition and say that, yes, people should generally work in person because that provides numerous benefits, especially when you talk about career advancement, right? If you're one of these people that like to work remotely and you don't like to interact with other people and stuff like that, don't be surprised when you lack opportunities to get promotions or to move up, okay? You have to be able to interact with other people in order to move up, okay? So I think that traditional work is something that is valuable, okay? I did it, okay? It's not my favorite thing, okay? Which is why I'm not doing it anymore, but still, okay? It ain't the worst thing in the world. But my point is this. Remote work is okay. I feel like every now and then, okay, as a way to keep your workers happy. But clearly, this is something that corporate America wants. And the reason why corporate America wants this, the managerial class wants this, is because they know that their workers are less productive. Now, if you listen to the academics, okay, and the workers themselves, they say, no, actually, I'm more productive when I am at home in my pajamas watching Netflix while I am working, okay? But I'm going to side with the private employers in the federal government here. And the reason why is because if workers were more efficient and more productive with remote work, then there would not be a corporate incentive to shift back to in-office work. I mean, a lot of these companies could literally just get rid of their offices and just be completely 100% remote, which some companies have done, okay? But in my opinion, since it is something that it seems like we're going back to, it's just like DEI. Companies have evaluated it and they said, okay, well, overall, it's just more beneficial for us to have people come into work, okay? It's more productive. It's better. Now, most people, when that happens, you either got a choice. You either got to go, comply, or you quit, right? I mean, it is what it is. So when you're talking about a federal worker, okay, you have people in the military who are also federal workers. And when the military say, hey, you got to move here, you got to move there, this is where you got to live, regardless of whether or not you got kids, regardless of your other situation or whatever you want to do or how you feel, you got to do it. So the military has to do it. In the private sector, you got to do it. Why shouldn't federal workers have to do it, right? If the federal government says, hey, you have to come work in person, you got to come back into the office, you have to be located near the office, you have to actually come into the office to work, I don't understand how is that inhumane, right? Have we become that soft of a society when it comes to our attitudes towards work where we think that it is inhumane to simply ask somebody to come into work in person? Doesn't matter if you've been working remotely the whole time. I just feel like this is a very first world problem type of thing, right? Where it's like we've gotten so complacent, so mediocre that we're just like, oh yeah, it is inhumane. It is terrible for my employer to ask me to come into work. Now, I mean, hey, if you bought a house, if you decided that, hey, I'm going to go buy a house out in, the middle of nowhere, right? 500 miles, 600 miles, 1,000 miles away from the office because of remote work. If you decided to do that, then hey, too bad, so sad. You're either going to have to sell the house or you have to rent it out. But, I'm just saying, generally speaking, nobody else is afforded this type of privilege, right? So ultimately, you just got to make hard choices.
We have a house that we love. We have a community that we love. Our whole lives are here. And I mean, this is, not the level of trauma that migrants and queer folks are feeling right now, but
wow, not the level of trauma that migrants and queer folks are feeling right now. Wow, thank you for putting that in the proper perspective, right? That even though you are a victim, okay, according to yourself, you're not in the worst situation. It can always be worse, right? It can always be worse than my employer making me come back to work or making my husband come back to work. I mean, she is in a bad situation, a very bad situation. But hey, it can always be worse, okay? What the migrants are going through, okay, committing crimes and being deported back to their countries, oh, that's terrible, absolutely terrible. Okay, what the queer folks are going through, that, oh, everybody's not required to play their game anymore. Oh, terrible things, right? Such terrible things happen in this country. I understand where she's coming from in regards to, okay, we've made our lives here, we've invested here, and we don't want to just get up and move. I think what these people fail to realize is that the shift towards remote work actually did the exact same thing. It had the exact same effect when people started to move away from the communities they were living in due to remote work, right? Like, for example, when you have these corporate parks, right, these big corporations where, they'll be on the outskirts of some city and there'll be a ton of companies there. You will have communities, apartments that will be built, restaurants that will come into the area, businesses will come into that area because you literally have thousands of workers in that area, right, that are working there during the day. So it's good business. They have a customer base, like it's a community. So when you introduce remote work and now all of a sudden you have these businesses choosing not to renew their leases, not to have employees come into work and stuff like that, now those apartment complexes that were built there, or those restaurants or those businesses that depend on people coming into work, actually being in the area, they suffer, right? And they lose a lot of money due to the fact that people are now moving away, or companies are saying, hey, we're not requiring people to come into work. We're just going to hire remotely. And again, that has a trickle-down effect. So communities have been destroyed. Businesses have been destroyed due to remote work, right? That's the reason why a lot of these politicians agree with it. They're not going to say it out loud, okay? The Democrats aren't going to make a big fuss about it. But for example, even the Democrat mayor of D.C. agrees that, yeah, y'all got to come back to work because the businesses in the inner city are suffering due to the fact that people aren't working, right? So it's give and take. And I'm not one of these people that believe that people shouldn't be allowed to work remotely at all. I just feel like there has to be a balance, right? I feel like people that are complaining because they can't work remotely full time or that they're being required to come back into the office, I think that's a lot to ask for, right? But if it's like, oh, let me work remotely 1 day a week, okay, and you still need to live, within the vicinity of the office, right? You can live out in the burbs, right? But at the same time, you need to be able to at least, drive to work, okay? I feel like that is a fair balance, right? That's a fair balance. So, again, I think a lot of this complaining, right, really just shows you how our society has become very soft when it comes to these things.
It's still trauma. It's still deeply inhumane. And I don't know what we're going to do. By the way, this is exactly how they want us to feel. They want us to feel just a deep sense of dread. They want us to feel completely overwhelmed by finding new schools for our children, finding housing on very short notice, because it's just a game to them. They want my husband to quit. And that sucks because he is one of the best employees in his agency. He works for the American people.
Well, if he's so great and his job is remote, then he should have no problem whatsoever finding a job in the private sector. But yes, she is correct. The point of this executive order is to weed people out, right? The people who should be working for the government will decide that, you know what, I just got to do what I got to do to come into work. And those are the people that will be kept. And the people who don't, okay, they're going to leave. And if they choose not to come and they choose to leave, then they probably should not have been working for the government in the first place. But again, if he's so great at his job, I think he should have no issues whatsoever finding gainful employment in the private sector, and you can stay where you're at, right? I'm just saying, there's a solution here, okay? It's not the worst situation in the world.
His job is to help Americans, and he does it. And don't fool yourselves about what this new administration is doing. This is not about productivity. This is not about getting money back for Americans. My husband's agency is fee funded, by the way. He collects zero of your tax dollars, and he still works his ass off for all of you. Anyway, sorry, I just got really angry there for a second. The main thing, though, is please do not look away from what is happening to American families. I mean, don't look away from any of it, but this isn't just about migrants. This isn't just about like gender issues. This It's not even about reproductive rights. It is about control and power over American families. Period. The end. It doesn't matter who you are, what you believe, what your choices are. They are coming for all of us. Don't look away.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. These people are characters. They really are. I'm not shedding a tear, man. I mean, I understand where you're coming from. I don't think it is a very pleasant situation, but I don't think it's the worst situation in the world. Okay. I just believe that it's not weird or it's not inhumane for somebody to have to move for their job, right? I mean, people get new job offers every day. Jobs require people to move around and do stuff every day. I mean, this is nothing new. These are just people that are finding something else to boohoo, whine, and cry about, right? That's what's happening. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.